And what if I told you the guy who saved Kiss was also the one who ripped it apart from the inside out? Vinnie Vincent showed up, lit the fuse, then vanished while the bodies were still warm. Here's the story they don't want you to hear.
Like, subscribe. Thank you.
Vincent John Cusano emerged from the blast furnace of Kiss's desperation. But in 1982, the band's empire was on life support. Ace Frehley had already checked out in every way except legally, vanishing into a haze of substance abuse, while Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley scrambled to keep the ship afloat. Creatures of the Night should have been Ace's victory lap, but the solos were ghosts. Instead, it was Robin Ford, Steve Ferris, anybody with a pulse and a strat. And then in walks Cusano, all chops and attitude, dropping searing licks that sounded like a sawmill on fire. The band needed a miracle, and Cusano, soon to be Vinnie Vincent, offered one. The dude was relentless, ripping through Killer, torching I Still Love You, and rewiring the band's sound with a speed and technicality that left the old Kiss fans gasping. Gene and Paul didn't hesitate. They yanked Frehley's Spaceman boots off the shelf and handed them to Vincent. Contractually, Ace still grinned from the album cover, but backstage, Vinnie Vincent was about to become the Egyptian Ankh warrior, Kiss's secret weapon, and for a moment, their unlikely savior. And that injection of talent was more than studio magic, it was survival. Vinnie's writing and guitar work rescued a record and brought the band to a new lease on life. But there was a storm behind the scene. Vincent's arrival marked the beginning of a volatile chapter. Blistering solos, ego clashes, and a relentless push-pull between band loyalty and solo ambition. And as quickly as Vinnie entered, the real drama was only getting started. The kind of drama that would turn a near-mythic guitar hero into rock's most notorious missing person, living behind a trail of lawsuits, vanishing acts, and a legend that the industry just still can't figure out. So now the stage persona was a total reinvention. Vinnie Vincent stepped out as this Egyptian Ankh warrior, a fever dream of gold paint, androgynous glam, and a pink Jackson V that looked like it was forged in the apocalypse. Paul Stanley built the character, but Vincent wore it like a suit of armor, all flash and fury, a hyperactive blur that made Ace Frehley look like a crash test dummy. And the Creatures of the Night tour dragged Kiss out of the quicksand. Vinnie, total shredder. Moved like a man with something to prove, and for a moment he turned every arena into a proving ground. And the album failed to blow up at first, but the legend was brewing. Hardcore fans still call it Kiss at their heaviest. And that was the Ankh Warrior effect. Too fast, too new, too much for the old guard, but a jolt of electricity the band definitely needed. And then came the great unmasking. Kiss peeled off the grease paint and walked straight into MTV's new world. And Vinnie, right in the thick of it, co-writing the entire Lick It Up album, 8 out of 10 of the songs, including the title track and the anthem All Hell's Breaking Loose. And for a second there, it looked like Vinnie Vincent had actually rebuilt the band and his image. The metal edge, the technical bombast, the VMA nomination. Kiss was back in the game, and Vinnie Vincent was the shot caller behind the curtain. But inside the camp, everything was already coming apart. The same drive that turned Vincent into a savior also made him radioactive. He wanted more than just a hired gun role. He wanted the keys to the kingdom. Full membership, royalties, full say. Meanwhile, Gene and Paul, burned by Frehley and Chris, refused to let anybody else in their inner circle. Vincent kept pushing, hard. He wanted what he felt that he earned, a real seat at the table. And suddenly the backstage stories got darker. The official line? Vincent was difficult. He argued about money, challenged Gene and Paul's decisions, shredded solos far past their expiration date, stretching songs into chaos. Paul Stanley's autobiography turned Vincent into a case study in self-destruction, an artist too talented and too stubborn for the machinery that he managed to step into. Gene's book didn't soften it either, said Vinnie was brilliant, but impossible. The tension reached a breaking point on the Lick It Up tour as Vincent's need for creative control and partnership clashed with Kiss's corporate firewall. And by spring of '84, it was done. The Savior got fired, less than 2 years after joining. Mark St. John took his place, but the revolving doors spun again almost instantly. St. John got knocked out by reactive arthritis, so Kiss, out of options and desperate for a warm body, dragged Vincent back for a handful of live dates. Nothing changed. Same clashes, same friction, same wild card energy that couldn't be contained. As soon as Bruce Kulick was ready, Vince was ejected for good. Vinnie's second exile was a real end, at least as far as Kiss was concerned. And for Vinnie Vincent, the next chapter was stranger, uglier, and even harder to explain. There's still a reason nobody ever really knows where the story goes from here. But Vinnie ended up doing his own thing. The Vinnie Vincent invasion left subtlety out of the equation. If Kiss was spectacle, the invasion became self-parody turned up to 11. Neon leather, laser show hair, a sound engineered for maximum sensory overload, Robert Fleischman howling over Vincent's endless streams of guitar notes, Dana Strum and Bobby Rock thrashing through a wall of processed drum and bass. Every detail screamed excess. And that debut LP in '86 marked Vinnie's return. Moderation was dead. Boys Are Gonna Rock made the MTV rounds, selling the band as a kind of hyper-glam mutant offspring of everything the 80s had to offer. And of course, behind the cartoon visuals, things were already disintegrating. Fleischman, with a voice that could shatter glass, was furious about the direction and the lyrics. He hated the idea of being a glorified extra in the Vinnie Vincent circus and refused to be a prop on tour. When it came time to shoot their big video, Fleischman was already out. Mark Slaughter slid into the frame, lip-syncing vocals he did not sing, while the band pretended nothing had changed. And Mark Slaughter's arrival became more than just a switch, it was this rebranding in real time. The band went on the road and found an audience hungry for the spectacle, for the shriek choruses and Vincent's relentless guitar warfare. 1988's All Systems Go dropped, riding on tracks like Ashes to Ashes, Love Kills, with the latter one sneaking onto the soundtrack of Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and giving the band their last real brush with mainstream relevance. And then the drama followed Vincent and multiplied. Former members described him as a control freak with a knack for financial vanishing acts. Songwriting, Vinnie's name on everything. Money, all funneled back to him, the rest in dispute. Creative control, non-negotiable. Slaughter, Strum, and Rock saw the writing on the wall and started plotting their escape. Allegations flew, withheld payments, unreasonable demands, backroom power plays. The result? Another band, another implosion. The invasion barely lasted 3 years before the core members split, taking what was left of the fan base and morphing it into the much more commercially viable Slaughter. Vinnie Vincent, meanwhile, was left standing alone in the wreckage again. And this is where the legend gets even murkier. So the fuse finally burned out in '88. You had Mark Slaughter and Dana Strum looking around, doing the math, and realizing there's no future with Vinnie Vincent. They left, staged a heist. The two convinced Chrysalis Records to stick with them, swapping out Vincent's name for their own and rebuilding the band from scratch. Got Tim Kelly on the guitar, Blas Elias on the drums. Just like that, Slaughter was born. The irony was hard to miss. Vincent's empire crumbled while his former sidemen went platinum, flooding MTV with Up All Night and Fly to the Angels. It was a third act nobody expected. Basically, Vinnie Vincent built the launch pad, lit the fuse, and got blasted out of his own story. So after the Invasion's implosion, Vinnie Vincent left the spotlight, totally disappeared into it. The next 3 decades were a cocktail of silence, litigation, urban legend. Vincent spent most of the 90s lawyering up against Kiss, launching wave after wave of lawsuits over songwriting royalties for Creatures of the Night and Lick It Up. None of it stuck. Simmons as Stanley, with lawyers on speed dial, shot down every claim. The public story? Vincent thought he was owed a king's ransom for his time in the trenches, especially as Kiss's old albums kept ringing the cash register. And that salted the earth for any chance of a real reunion. Gene and Paul made sure everybody knew the lawsuits were endless, the headaches permanent. And things soured on the Invasion side as well. Ex-bandmates accused Vinnie of sitting on unreleased tapes, locking up the vault, demanding the world on his terms before he'd ever let the material see daylight. That there was a way to freeze his own legacy, he found it. And the industry learned to keep its distance. Vinnie was less of a person and more of a rumor. No new interviews or records or public sightings. The silence was radioactive. Fans spun wild stories. He was either dead or in a bunker or underground or living under a new name. Longer he stayed away, the wackier the stories got. But then, in January 2018, everything flipped. Out of nowhere, Vinnie Vincent's name showed up on the Atlanta Kiss Fan Expo bill. A lot of people thought it was a joke, but the hype was real. Fans poured in, some expecting a train wreck, others just hoping to see the man who vanished. And when Vincent finally walked out, he appeared not as the pink-haired shredder or the Egyptian Ankh warrior. No makeup, just a pink suit, a scarf, and a look that said he'd been through hell and somehow made it back. He was subdued, almost gentle, grateful for the cheers, overcome by the crowd. So he thanks the fans, promises some new music, teased an autobiography, and even hinted at real shows. He played a low-key acoustic set with 4x8, dropping Kiss deep cuts and leaving everybody wondering if the redemption arc was actually happening. And for a minute, it felt possible. Maybe this was the comeback, the final act that would tie everything together. The crowd believed, or at least wanted to, but old habits are hard to break. The redemption story arc collapsed almost instantly. Vincent's name started popping up on flyers, Merry Metal Christmas in Memphis, a speedball jam show, more events lined up like dominoes. Promoters were shouting about the comeback and fans were buying tickets. Then the cancellation started. Shows pulled, promises broken, confusion turning into anger as one event or another vanished. Lawsuits reappeared. Business partners were complaining, and families' familiar spiral began again. And the curtain fell fast. Vincent slipped right back into the shadows again, taking his mystique, lawsuits, and unfinished story with him. But what really happened with that Memphis Christmas comeback was even pretty whacked out in and of itself. Promoters said that Vinnie Vincent's team torpedoed the whole thing with last-minute contract rewrites, escalating demands, and enough drama to make even the Kiss camp flinch. Derek Christopher, the main promoter, went public, blaming Vincent for blowing up the deal and leaving him tens of thousands in the hole. And really, it just came down to the fact that Vincent was just always moving the goalposts, changing terms until the show was dead in the water. And Vincent, for his part, fired back with statements blaming the promoters, sometimes directly, sometimes through a proxy, sometimes in social media posts, claimed they were incompetent, contractual failures, everything short of outright sabotage. So you get these new dates that would get announced and hyped only to collapse in the same cloud of finger pointing and silence. Nashville Kiss Expo, another no-show. And then somewhere within all that chaos, Vinnie Vincent tried staking a claim to Vinnie Vincent's Kiss, applying for a trademark and lighting up another round of legal threats. Kiss's lawyers were instantly on the attack. By now, even diehard fans recognize the cycle, the promise of a return, inevitable implosion, and a trail of lawsuits and burned bridges where a reunion should have been. And Vincent never stuck around long enough to clean up the mess, and every fresh attempt to reclaim his legacy only made the myth stranger. By the time the 2020s rolled in, Vincent had faded again. Not completely. The occasional limited edition piece of merch would pop up online, a few strange emails or messages would circulate, but nothing close to a true comeback. No albums or shows or real closure, just more rumors and speculation. But Vinnie Vincent's legacy is a masterclass in contradiction. A guitar player whose raw talent could rescue a band as massive as Kiss, only to be dragged down again and again by the fallout of his own actions. He rebuilt careers and then detonated them. Walk into a room, change everything, but staying was another story. His battles, creative, legal, personal, never quite resolve. They just mutate, keeping the wacky myth alive while the music itself is trapped in limbo. Ask 10 people why Vincent disappeared and you get 10 different answers, each wilder than the last. He remains rock's perennial mystery, an unfillable void, and a name that means as much for what he left undone as for what he actually did. And that's the trick. The story never ends because the last chapter never gets written. The real mystery isn't where Vinnie Vincent went, it's why nobody can stop looking for him. God, Vinnie's story is pretty freaking weird, if you think about it. But he is just kind of a weird guy. Leave your opinions or Vinnie's stories down in the comments below. To my subscribers, I want to thank you so much. What can I say? You were just freaking awesome. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, take your pink flying V and give that subscribe button a good smash with it. Then turn it right around and also hit that like button. Join the family. I want to thank you so much for watching.